Yeah, two things about what you said. So, number one, when you brought up horror, which my producer who's here, she loves horror. And for
Yes.
me, where you talked about the sounds, since I was a kid, would traditionally, if I knew the music was starting to pick up pace, that means something scary is about to happen. I would
Yeah.
start laughing hysterically so I could hear myself laugh over the music I was hearing to make sure that I got rid of the fear in the moment. So that was one thing. Number two, where you brought up the concerts and experience. So I want to ask you about Beyonce because she is the one that people say that brings up an experience that is the most memorable. I will be honest, I haven't seen her in concert since Essence in like 2013. So, and if that I have that year right, it was between that
Word.
time.
Yeah.
So, but either way, we know that she is like the queen of bringing that experience to the table,
Mhm.
right? And so she's also one of the most recent examples of what we're talking about. When her album Renaissance actually came out in 2022, we saw a lot of pastors and religious leaders
Yep.
who were warning against the music, saying it's
Mhm.
demonic. And then her 2020 Black is King musical also confused some listeners and viewers. What are your thoughts about Beyonce and that experience and the sound that we're talking about?
First of all, I love Beyonce, Queen Bee,
Yeah.
period. The end. And the experience is right, absolutely incredible and amazing. Okay, let's talk about that point about the devil's music.
Yeah.
Okay, last I checked, now it's been a hot second, but Lucifer, right? Wasn't he the god of music or the angel of music? I'm sorry.
Hmm.
Okay, got kicked out of heaven. So it would make sense that that we would consider music to be demonic and certain musics to be. I have a hard time um, classifying music being of the devil
Yeah.
in a way that is bad. Now, I tend to think of things not necessarily as good and evil, but positive and negative, and they're both there to balance one another. And it is
Hmm.
up to us to then, I think, in a way of morality, then we decide what's good and what's bad. So back in the
Hmm.
day, Mr. Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, who was composing
Hmm.
lots of music for the church. And we know about the church, right? So the thing is, there's this interval in music called the devil's interval. And it's the tritone because it divides the octave exactly in half. And to the ear, it sounds wrong. It sounds not okay
Yeah.
until you put it in context, right? And one of the reasons why it sounds off is because we feel it in our body. Second, you put it into context and you start to experience it a little more, you realize, oh, hey, it's actually not that bad of an interval. It's really the I think what we assign to what we don't know and what we're not. That's what we when we start to focus on a message and find a message that is negative, then we can always find that in it. So if for me, if we're going to say that about Beyonce, we should say that about all music. Going back to my first point, you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah, I got you.
but ultimately, I feel though that it's really the perception of the person and from where they're coming from, right? I don't necessarily think a music or a sound is inherently bad until it's being used that way and
Ooh.
intentionally used that way. For example, there's um, in Texas, there's a bit mining industry, like factory. The music or the sound, I'm sorry, the sound that's coming from it is so loud, it's actually making the people physically ill. They've complained about it, they've talked about it, just causing them all sorts of anxiety. The company knows and they won't do anything about it. That, my friend, is, I feel, is intentional evil
Mm.
because that what's driving that is Bitcoin and money and Wall Street. They're not caring about the consequences, right? So for me, that's where I start to get more of like an activist in the creativity
Yeah.
world because then we can say they start saying, okay, well, it's the music, it's the artist, it's the particularly the black artists that are causing it. You know, it's like the message that they're no, it's I don't think so. I don't know of any artists that are intentionally putting their music out and saying, I'm trying to make people mad and angry.
Mm.
You know, it's like I want people to relate to what I'm talking to. There's a prompt that I gave some middle school kids when I was teaching in the desert. I said, Mr. Marley once said that when music hits, you feel no pain. Let's talk about it. So write your feelings down. Let's unpack that. And the vast majority of them were like, no, actually, you hear a song and you like your emotions take you to a place and that's all you feel. You start crying. I say, well, what about that song you might hear where those tears are tears of joy? And then what
Yeah.
happens after you experience that? Help me understand. And they're like, wait a minute. Actually, after a good cry, I feel a little better. I was like, that is the point of what he was saying. It's not that music is supposed to make you go out and tear stuff up. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes it hypes you up and does that. But interestingly, there are some circumstances around that that are encouraging that, right? And so when you unpack it in that way, you realize, at least for me, it's about a transfer and transformation of energy. I remember being in
Yeah.
middle school and being bullied to the point where I was like, this is crazy. But I wasn't trying to get in
Wow.
no fights, you know, because I'm trying to be a model student, right? Get the A's, get the B's. I'm firstborn, trying to do the thing. And, you know, being a black male in the South,
Yes.
you
It's
better
hard out
have it
here.
together.
Hmm.
Otherwise, they're
Hmm.
coming after you. And so for me, I don't, yeah, it's really hard to kind of get into this whole thing of like, oh, the music is evil, and also like blaming a particular artist and saying it's of the devil. I think a lot of it has to do with the message of what she was talking about, which is recognizing oneself and being free in oneself, which often doesn't is the opposite of what the church is talking about.
Hmm.
And you know, it's very much a spiritual walk and relationship with the Almighty, and still everybody's all in your business.
Yeah.
But while
Yeah.
we're talking about the church and the hip hop realness,
Yeah.
right, we know that the church is largely steeped in a very religious tradition. Nothing wrong with that, but that means it's also slow to evolve in the musical setting, right?
Hmm.
At one point, blues was not allowed in church. Now you can't listen to one of them old hymns without doing a blues progression, right?
Hmm.
And we can thank Mr. Hardy for that. And all these people, Precious Lord, Take My Hand, you could add a little blues flavor to that. And all of a sudden, we start wailing on this organ, right? These things all then go into the hip hop, into the culture. And this is the way we've been communicating. And to the point about the evil, and I'm going to let it go.
Okay.
I feel like that is also a buy-in from the systemic racism that we dealt with when we first got here. Why? When we came over here, we brought with us a number of things, okra and our music. Yes. So the drumming in the square was our way of communicating. There's this drum we call in the West the talking drum. So you put
Yeah.
it under your arm and it strings on it. You hit it with a stick and you can adjust the pitch, right? You can have a whole conversation with just
Hmm.
that drum. Different rhythms mean certain things, different passages, different gestures, not a word spoken. And so when we would go to the Conga Square in New Orleans for that free day they gave us on Sundays, these are
Yeah.
the things that were happening. And so they would start to notice, like after they was doing all that drumming stuff, awful things started to happen. There was these rebellions and people's uprisings started to happen. Nobody knew about these. People were like, oh, the slaves did do it. No, we were definitely communicating about it. We were definitely organizing, right? And so fast forward to, you know, blues, jazz, which wasn't really called jazz at first. All the early jazz artists, and some of us still don't really like that term because it was used as a derogatory term. So perpetuating this myth of anything black is evil or of the devil, right?
Mm.
And that's not the case at all. We're trying to figure out a way to continue the rich tradition that we have come here with. The traditional African, as I understand, thinks about music in a universal standpoint, not necessarily as a commodity, but something where you're not separate from that. It is
Hmm.
one and the same. And so that's why, again, the dichotomy of good versus evil, bad versus good, I tend to think of it now necessarily as a positive and a negative, and one has to have the other to balance, and neither one is good and neither one is bad. It's about who is interpreting it, and then who's also weaving the spell. Going back to the weaving the spell in the music, um,
Hmm.
you can definitely do this if you're into numerology, for example. Our musical system, if you look at it, is all based on ratios and uh, basically extracting notes and pitch basically out of thin air. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you do that, there's a set frequency for each one. And when you evoke it, you, again, the transfer of energy from one thing to the next. It then goes back to my point about the intention, right? So you
Yeah.
use these numbers. For me, numbers are super symbolic, and there's only nine. The rest of them are a combination between one and nine, right? For example, when you get to 10, one and zero, 11, one and one. So then that then just creates a spiral to the next dimension, if you will. Each number then is given a either some sort of metaphysical meaning, or it has already some sort of significance. Like, for instance, number six is considered a magical number. Three is also that, and so is nine, because of the way that they interact with all the other numbers and the way that they naturally balance into something that is equal. Yeah. So we can get deep off into that, but you know,
Yeah, like you're educating me. So I know that people are going to learn a lot from this because even just to kind of take this conversation into the space of like really dissecting like what it is that we're hearing
yeah.
and to understand those feelings. And you mentioned something I wanted to go back to with when you talked about like the beat of the drums and like
Mm,
communicating. And so my question is going back to even Beyonce. So,
yeah.
she uses sounds like horns and the
Mm-hmm.
cowrie, for instance, the cowrie shells in her music. And this is pretty much common in some African spiritual practices. Do you think
Yes.
that people associate those sounds in her music with devil worship because they don't properly actually understand African culture?
I think I think that could be a definite conclusion for sure.
Uh-huh.
Um, you know, these again, yeah, these instruments. I What I know about like the ethnomusicology, right? And
Yeah.
and 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 there are certain instruments that are used for specific rituals,
Okay.
and I don't know of many of those instruments that are used specifically for anything that is particularly demonic or devilish, right?
Hmm.
There might be like a ritual for which it is not used in public, and it's only for a specific group of people.
Hmm.
Um, I know I play the yodaki, which in the West we call it the didgeridoo, and depending on which Aboriginal tribe you're talking to, it may or may not be okay for me to be playing that instrument because they're used for different things, right? So
Got it.
ceremonial things, right? And so if I'm playing it in a space where I'm providing a blessing for a wedding, for instance, right? Another person might be, yo, why are you playing that at their wedding? That's We only play that during a death ceremony, or what I'm saying, or
Yeah.
this particular way of playing. So I think a lot of it has to do, yes, with the color and the instrument, but it may also just be the context. And so if you're once upon a time, I know that like in certain uh spaces, their
Yeah.
instruments aren't allowed in the religious ceremony. Some of them are full of instruments. Certain horns, or like the shofar, for instance, is used in a lot of Jewish ceremonies, and those are also natural ones that we find in Africa. I don't see a lot of people using shofars here, if but
Yeah.
I can't get down with the horns thing and the drums and the way I can't. I don't want to. I don't want to put it in a sense of like saying that somebody's wrong for viewing it that way,
Yeah.
but also from what I understand and what I know about the intentionality, and from just what I'm receiving from it, it doesn't necessarily lend itself to um, that way of thinking.
I got you. So what about hip hop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes how you said some stuff is designed to get you hype, and then there are certain lyrics sometimes that may get you hype in the wrong way. Like I know in middle school, I'm bouncing whether it was to Boosie and whatever,
Oh,
or maybe it was Webby back then, and he's like murder, murder, kill, kill, all in my eyes, and I'm just saying it, and I'm turned up. Not saying I want to murder somebody, so let me be clear.
I
But
feel
I'm just saying.
like
But do you believe there's a push to deliver certain beats and actual like lyrics to the Black community to promote violence and typically hold us back? What you think?
I I wouldn't put it past the industry.
Okay.
I don't know necessarily again that the creatives that are putting the music out are intending that, right? Um, and I'm walking that line very carefully
Okay.
because again I can't speak for everyone, but I just know for me, because I know the power of that.
Mhm.
And people, if you're subjected to it all the time, or if you're in a particular state, or again, how are you experiencing it? At what age are you? What are the factors that are around you engaging that? I asked my sister this the other day. I was like, maybe it was yesterday. I was like, what do you think about these things? And she was like, yeah, I might get turned up. I was like, okay, so what then in that moment keeps you from going too far? Right? Because I'm definitely, we're aware that music is that the beat, right? It's in our DNA. You start with the heartbeat. That's all of our original beat. And then if you play in a musical ensemble, everybody, what they do is they force you to a metronome, so everybody gets on the same beat, right? Well,
Hmm.
okay, so we all on the same beat now. Are we all moving together? We know that if you get a giant mass in motion, it's gonna move and it's gonna take a second to stop it, right? Okay, so at what point do you say, okay, I'm gonna resist this movement? Because I'm always of the mindset, if the spirit is moving, you let it, because we're all in motion. Now, with that being said, if there's a moment where things start to get a little chaotic, you screaming murder, 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 or you jumping in that mosh pit, for instance, like the tragedy that happened at the Astroworld situation with the Travis Scott realness, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You have this whole experience. Everybody knows that you're going there to get turned up, right? So that is not something new, and that should not be a surprise. However, the collective realness of all of that energy and all of those people pushing, right? Now you have a situation where something that is meant for people to come and let loose and let their body be taken to nirvana, if you will, right? And let loose and transfer and transform that energy, now has become a situation where, oops, wait a minute, we might have can learn from this, right? And the next time put some mechanisms in place that will still allow people to have that experience, but without being hurt in the process, right? So again, it's
Hmm.
all about the intention, and but also knowing that there's a result of wielding these elements. And a lot of people make fun of me because they're like, oh, you sound like you're some wizard or something. And at the end of the day, when you realize that these sounds that come to us naturally affect us in a specific way. Waterfalls, for instance, 95% of people that listen to them are going to be lulled into a calming state. Same thing with birds, right? There's also that percentage of people that be like, can they shut up, please? Right? Because
Hmm.
the way that their senses work and the way that they're experiencing it in the space that they're experiencing it is making it horrible and horrendous for them, which is why we have the different genres, why we have different uh, people that we relate to musically, aesthetically, all the things, because they take us back to that the overall experience. Where were we when we first heard Beyonce? I bet somebody can tell you, right? Or, remember that one time we were in the restaurant and the food tasted so good and we were listening to, right? Or you're walking outside and you're just screaming at the person next to you, and you walk to the next block and you realize, oh, wait a minute, there's a whole bunch of traffic going on, and now my heart is a lot less dramatic just turning the corner,
Hmm.
right? Once we start to pay attention to these ways that sound is affecting us, and also understanding that the intention is not necessarily to induce an evil or to manipulate people, which it is used for, then we start to think about it and have a little bit more responsibility, and interact with it a little less carelessly. I know a lot of people who constantly have music playing, and I'm listening to what they're listening to, and I'm like, you listen to that all the time? And okay, great. Now let's talk about how you're actually feeling. You can tell from
Hmm.
somebody's playlist what they're actually going through, and what they're feeling. But it's like, okay, do me a favor. If this music is relating to you, try something that's the opposite. One, to challenge yourself to see if you can get through it, and then two, to see if you can discover something that puts you in a different state using music, right? That way, you find out the therapeutic ways that these sounds can be beneficial to you, and you can also recognize when a commercial is using music to entice you to go buy something, or if an artist says something in their poetry and their lyrics, like a Kendrick Lamar, for instance, it encourages us to look a little bit deeper and say, hey, wait a minute, A minor, no sharps, no flats, no black keys. How bland, how interesting. Why? I wonder why. And then you start to realize all the intricacies of the messages that are woven into that spell, right? You realize that is a spell of good magic, if you will, and a good message. And I feel like, with the same context, you can find somebody who can find something that wasn't so, good and intentional about it. It really boils down to our perspective and the way we experience the sound. And that, if you're in the city, hip hop, a direct result of what was going on in the unrest, civil unrest in the city, right? It's got an urban grit to it that we just like, that's what we need. That's the vibe, right? But then you take that and you go with, and maybe take that and get some country vibes going in it. Now you have a completely different genre that speaks to a completely different group of people with the same energy, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I can geek out
Listen.
about this and go on all these tangents all day.
Well, we love it though, but I was gonna say, so we're gonna have to reserve that for a part two because there's so much to talk about when it comes to this. But super excited about the work you're doing, and then just kind of the impact that you're having on the music world and really educating us. So we want to thank you for
Thank
just
you.
making an appearance on the show and sharing all of this knowledge with us.
It's been an honor, Brittany. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm happy to do a part two. Let me know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my goodness, folks. Wasn't Kennedy Barrett just amazing? We want to thank him so much for joining us here on the latest word on Black News. And of course, we want to thank you all for continuing to watch us and roll with us each week. And please, please, please let us know. We want you to weigh in. What do you consider devil music? What do you think about hip hop today and other forms of music? And how does it make you feel when you listen to a song? Please let us know. But for now, I'm your host, Brittany Jones. And until next time, take care.